Joining us from Capitol Hill in the Russell Rotunda is Senator Bernie Sanders, independent of Vermont, to talk about this idea of changing the filibuster rules when it comes to executive nominations. Senator Sanders, after last night's meeting, we've learned from the papers this morning, no deal was reached. But as of this morning, have you heard anything from your leadership what's the path forward here?
Well, we'll be going to the floor pretty shortly, and we will see what will happen. Here is my concern, and I speak as a former mayor. When you're a chief executive, whether it's a corporation or a city or the federal government or the United States of America, you have to have people. When you're the president, you have to have the right to appoint people to be head of the Department of Labor, the Environmental Protection Agency. That's what our Constitution is about. And I find it very disturbing that in an unprecedented way, Greta, Republicans are making it impossible for the president to have his team by filibustering these appointments. And I think while we're focusing today on presidential appointments, the issue really is even deeper than that. It is the dysfunctionality of the United States Senate. From 1917 to 1967, the filibuster was used less than 50 times. Since Harry Reid has been majority leader in the last 6.5 years, he has had to try to overcome filibusters more than 400 times. So right now, the gentleman's agreement, if you like, that had been reached for many, many years, that we will have votes, 51 votes wins, is completely discarded. It requires 60 votes to pass anything at a time. When our country has so many very, very serious problems, we have a collapsing middle class. We have real unemployment at over 14%. Kids can't afford to go to college. What the American people are saying, hey, Senate, do something. Have a debate. Vote. Address these issues. But what's happening, unfortunately, is we can't get 60 votes to overcome a filibuster, and the Senate is largely dysfunctional. That's what we're trying to deal in a small way today. Frankly, I would go further.
You would go further how?
I believe in the concept of a talking filibuster, in the sense that in the Senate, unlike the House, we have got to be very strong in protecting minority rights. Today it's the Republicans, tomorrow it could be the Democrats. What does that mean? It means if legislation comes up, and I strongly disagree with that, I and my colleagues should be allowed to go onto the floor and talk for as long as we want. A couple of years ago, I was on the floor for 8.5 years in opposition to legislation.
8.5 hours.
8.5 hours, that's right. 8.5 hours. People can do that. Argue that if you need a week, do it. But at the end of that period of time, let's finally have a vote with 51 votes winning. So the concern that I have right now is the American people don't even see the conflict. Most people, myself included, want to see us raise the minimum wage. Millions of people working for poverty wages. I doubt very much that we will even be able to bring that bill to the floor for a vote because of Republican obstructionism. So my view is minority has the right to talk as much as they want, to have as long a debate as they want. But at the end of the day, the American people, at a time when we have so many serious crises, want action. We've got to have a vote. Majority rules.
Senator Sanders, what are the odds that the nuclear option is put into place, that the filibuster rules are changed for executive nominations?
Well, I think if we be patient, we'll probably find out what will happen in a few hours.
And our coverage on C-SPAN 2 of that debate kicks off around 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and then at 11 a.m., that is when the Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid has set up these first test votes. Richard Cordray is up first. Senator Sanders, let me ask you about what the Senate Republican Policy Committee has put out on the numbers of when it comes to President Obama's nominees. They say this: of the 1,564 nominations President Obama has sent to the Senate, only 4 have been rejected. Republicans have worked with Democrats over 1,500 times over the past 4.5 years.
That's not, you know, what that is about is in the federal government and in the administration, you have hundreds and hundreds of undersecretaries of this and undersecretaries of that. Yes, I gather that they have been appointed. But on key issues, for example, right now, some of us are very concerned about the major planetary crisis of global warming. We need an EPA administrator. I'm on the Environmental Committee. What I can tell you is the ranking member has submitted 1,100 questions for the nominee. And to me, you know, that's Gina McCarthy. And most people see her as a reasonable person, nonpartisan type person. We do not have an EPA administration. The issue of the National Labor Relations Board, I think that was discussed a few moments ago by Norm Ornstein, a very important agency. It is no secret that many Republicans do not believe that workers should be able to exercise their rights, whether it's to form a union, to have a legal recourse if they are unjustly fired. So what's the answer? The answer is not to appoint any members to the NLRB to make it dysfunctional. We have a Consumer Financial Protection Board right now, part of Dodd-Frank. Banks are ripping off people right and left. This will give consumers some protection. What Republicans are saying, we don't like that board. So instead of changing the law, which they probably can't, what they're simply doing is denying that board an administrator. Secretary of Labor, the same thing. So, you know, Greta, there are all kinds of rather minor positions which are usually appointed in a perfunctory way. But I think there is no question that in terms of major appointments, having overcome a filibuster for the Secretary of Defense and these other important appointments, Republicans have been quite obstructionist.
Republicans, though, say when it comes to the National Labor Relations Board that the work it does, that is what they're upset about. And they point to the Boeing case and say that Republicans accuse the National Labor Relations Board of discriminating against states in the South that were attracting investment from more heavily unionized states.
In other words, what they're saying is they disagree with a decision made by the National Labor Relations Board. That's their right. But you don't prevent people from getting appointed to the board because you disagree with a decision. There are two sides to every story. But that's exactly the point. They disagree that the Environmental Protection Agency might be aggressive in dealing with maybe the most serious problem our planet faces, and that is global warming. So what's their remedy? It's not to argue. What do they believe? How should we go forward in terms of energy efficiency, sustainable energy? That's not what they're talking about. They're saying we can defeat, we can prevent movement toward global warming by preventing the selection of an EPA administrator. That's an inappropriate way to address that problem.
Okay. Mike is up first. Brandywine, Maryland. Republican caller, you're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to try to keep it short. With Senator Sanders on, I could go on for a while, but I'm going to try to keep it short. The reason the Republicans are doing what they're doing is very simple. The Democratic Party is owned lock, stock, and barrel by the progressive movement, and that philosophy is 180 degrees at odds with the philosophy of the founders. And thus the policies that come out of big Democrat majorities are policies that are fundamentally at odds with the philosophy of the founding. Now, we're in a situation where how can I put this? If the Republicans do not do this, they are not being faithful to the people that sent them to Congress. They were sent there for the purpose of obstructing these policies and this political philosophy.
All right, Senator Sanders, on that point.
All right. Well, look, Mike, every member of the Senate was elected, and every member of the Senate has the right to stand up and fight for his or her point of view. You do not have the right, in my view, of abusing the rules of the Senate and making it dysfunctional. And I have to disagree with you, Mike. I am a progressive. I believe that we should defend Social Security, not cut it. You know what? Vast majority of the American people support me. I believe that at a time when the gap between the very, very rich and everybody else is growing wider, we should ask the wealthy and large corporations, 1 out of 4 that don't pay any taxes at all, to start paying their fair share of taxes. You know what? The vast majority of the American people agree with me, not the Republicans. I believe that when real unemployment is close to 14%, we should be rebuilding our infrastructure, putting millions of people back to work. You know what, Mike? Vast majority of the people agree with me. So I do not believe that the right-wing philosophy is the dominant philosophy. But be that as it may, what we should be doing is having real debates. Let the philosophies debate, and let's have a majority of vote. And if the American people don't like the results, that's what elections are about. You know, the American people did elect Barack Obama president of the United States. He has the right to appoint his people to major departments of the government.
Larry's next. Memphis, Tennessee, Democratic caller.
Good morning. I think the Republicans are just being hypocrites on this thing. The government to do anything for poor people or middle-class people. They'll get against that, but they don't have a problem with the government helping their rich friends with subsidies and tax breaks and contracts. They want to privatize everything and then get the government money to the contractors. But poor people, they don't want to do anything for it. And I hear one thing I don't understand, Mr. Senator, would you comment on this? Why do poor and middle-class people vote for Republicans? They'll get anything to help poor middle-class people. I don't understand why.
That is an excellent question, probably subject for a longer debate right now than we have time for right now. But this is what I would say. In my view, have taken it in a very giant step in the wrong direction. So as I've mentioned, since Reid has been majority leader, Democrats have been in power, he has had to bring forth over 400 cloture votes. This is far, far, far more than was ever the case before. So yes, Democrats were guilty as well, but the Republicans have taken this obstructionism to a whole new level, making the Senate in many ways dysfunctional.
Washington, D.C., Joaquin, Independent Line.
Good morning. So I've been listening to this talk about obstructionism, and Senator Sanders was speaking about having a debate of philosophies, and I'm thinking about what happens when partisan politics takes over to the degree that one has to, let aside his principles, his philosophies, like Senator Harry Reid denying to move up the bill to audit the Fed. For 20 years, he's been speaking of auditing the Fed. Senator Bernie Sanders, I know that you've been a major supporter of auditing the Fed. Alan Grayson supported auditing the Fed. Ron Paul. How come Harry Reid no longer wants to talk about this issue?
I mean, that's, first of all, I will tell you that it was my amendment as part of Dodd-Frank, of which for the first time did do a very revelatory audit of the Fed during the Wall Street financial crisis, and we learned a great deal from that. I believe that the Fed should be audited. But the point is, forgetting that issue, I mean, you can criticize Reid or anybody else that you want. What I want to see in the Senate is majority rule. If somebody, including myself, wants to bring forth legislation, an amendment or legislation to bring forth Fed reform, let's have the debate on Fed reform. Let's not prevent that vote from taking place by obstructionism. I go back to the minimum wage issue. The American people want to see the minimum wage raised. I doubt that we will ever have a vote on that issue. The American people want to ask the wealthiest people in this country to start paying their fair share of taxes so we can invest in infrastructure and in education and lower the deficit. Frankly, we will probably never have a vote on that issue. We spend a huge amount of time just trying to overcome filibusters, and when we only have 54 or 55 votes, that's virtually impossible to do.
Joe, in Yuma, Arizona, Democratic caller, you're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Yes, ma'am. Senator Sanders is my hero in Washington. I just am calling about all the demonizing that's called in of the labor unions. You know, the labor unions basically only control 10% of the work in this country, and 10% of the workers of this country can't do all the bad things that these Republicans are trying to put on us and of doing. It's just we help everybody. We help the people that aren't in the unions. Yeah, all labor is benefited by unions. That's just not the union members. Anyways.
Okay, Senator, I assume you agree with that?
I sure do.
All right.
I think when you look at many of the great social achievements in America, we owe it to the working men and women of the trade union movement.
When it comes to the labor secretary, the Wall Street Journal this morning editorial board says Democrats want to give a pass to Tom Perez. They said the House Oversight Committee subsequently conducted a year-long investigation and interviewed senior administration officials involved in a deal with, including Mr. Perez. Documents and testimony from other witnesses are at odds with the account Mr. Perez gave to the committee, including who came up with the idea of quid pro quo, who supported it, and whether or not it was properly vetted. Mr. Perez has not explained these inconsistencies, referring to a legal quid pro quo last year involving the city of St. Paul and Mr. Perez when he was at the Justice Department Civil Rights Division, heading that up.
Well, actually, I'm on the Senate Committee, Health, Education, Labor, that deals with that. Mr. Perez did give a very thoughtful explanation of his role in that issue. That the Wall Street Journal, which is strongly, their editorial board, which is strongly anti-labor, would be opposed to a Secretary of Labor who actually believes in the rights of working people, should not be a great surprise to anybody. But this is just, again, another example of Republican obstructionism, of preventing the president from having a Secretary of Labor to run a very important department.
John Doe on Twitter says, the president has the power to present nominations, the Senate has the power to advise and consent. Let me go to Harold, who is in Florida, Republican caller. Hi there.
Hi, let me paraphrase Harry Reid about 6 years ago. What he said was the nuclear option would destroy the Senate and destroy the nation. It was the most dangerous thing, and that he never, ever would do it if he was in control. You know, I don't have much respect for Harry Reid. He can't pass a budget, can't do a lot of things, but he is beholden to the labor unions. That's the truth. If you want to ask why Republicans don't want the EPA or the NLRB changed, it's because what they're doing is basically changing the nation. You change the NLRB, you change all workers in America. And
okay, I have to, we're running out of time with the senator, so I'll have him
First
respond.
of all, the caller says the Senate can't pass a budget. Reid can't pass a budget. Well, guess what? We did pass a budget. But when you talk about obstructionism, you know what's going on right now? The Republicans are refusing to allow that budget to go to conference committee. That's obstructionism. In terms of the issue of the NLRB, we've had an NLRB for a very, very long time, since the 1930s. Yes, in my view, workers do have the right to legal recourse if they are treated unfairly or illegally in the workplace. Apparently, the caller does not agree with that. Many Republicans do not agree with that, but I think it's the right thing to do.
Senator Sanders, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.